Low energy, unfocused, foggy? You might be dehydrated. Whether it's hot yoga, over 100-degree weather, or too much sun. Gator Light, with a specialized blend of 5 electrolytes, was scientifically designed to help move fluids into the body faster for rapid rehydration. Shop now at retailers nationwide. Gator Light hydrates faster than water. Is it in you? Symptoms noted are signs of mild to moderate dehydration. Consult a healthcare professional if symptoms persist.
This message is brought to you by Apple Card. Shave ice by the beach. A trip to the state fair. And a throwback flick at the local drive-in. They're more than just items to check off the summer bucket list. They're also opportunities to earn 2% daily cash back when you use your Apple Card with Apple Pay. Apply for Apple Card now and use in minutes with Apple Pay. Subject to credit approval. Apple Card is issued by Goldman Sachs Bank USA, Salt Lake City branch. Terms and more at applecard.com.
The new LinkedIn Hiring Pro can't undo your last hire. The human postponer. They were the master of one phrase. I'll circle back on that. But 3 months later, you are the one doing all their work and wondering how big that circle is. But LinkedIn Hiring Pro can take the hiring load off your plate by automating the hiring busy work from the initial job post to scheduling interviews. Hire right the first time with LinkedIn Hiring Pro. Post a free job today at linkedin.com/quality.
Coach Unplugged is brought to you by great people over at teachhoops.com for coaches who want to get better. From the Fifth Quarter Studios in Madison, Wisconsin, you're listening to Coach Unplugged. Here is your host, Steve Collins.
Hey everybody, welcome to Coach Unplugged, episode 532. I always like to do a rewind week once or twice a year, and this is going to be our rewind week. I'm going to go back. We're already on to 500 and some podcasts. I'm going to go back to some of the ones in the early hundreds because they're not in our feed anymore and share them with you, some of the ones I like. So that's going to be all week. But before we get into that, today we're going to talk with Brian McCormick about discussing basketball and analytics and some of those things. But before we get to that, I'd like to give a big shout out to our 2 sponsors. First of all, Dr. Dish. They have come on board for 2020, so we're very excited about that. They've also offered an increase in the discount for you, so go over and check out Dr. Dish. They'll give you $350 off your next purchase. Just mention Coach Unplugged. Do that. It helps us a lot. And then also go over and check out teachhoops.com for coaches who want to get better. It is my baby. It is what I wish I would have had when I started coaching or even 10 years ago. It's the resources, a community of coaches that are going through exactly what you're going through. So go over and check that out. And let's head off to the podcast. We really appreciate you joining us today and taking time to spend some jogging time or commuting time or whatever it is to learn a little bit more about the great game of basketball. And today we have Brian McCormick on. Great interview with Brian. He's such a cerebral coach. He thinks the game at such a different level than all of us. But before we get to that, before we get to Brian's interview, I want to say that if you're a coach and you're looking this time of year to broaden your craft, to become a better coach, it is the sole reason I started teachhoops.com was to make a resource for coaches that could allow them to become a better coach. And you will not find a better deal. You know, if you've gone on anything and tried to buy a DVD recently or a book or something, you're spending $30, $40, $50 for one resource. In our library alone, we have 55 Hall of Fame coaches and players and former players and high school coaches and people all over that will allow you to become a better coach. They'll give you some of those things. And I can tell you right now at Teach Hoops, we're working on courses for this upcoming late summer and fall that are going to be dealing with weight training. They're going to be dealing with practice planning. They're going to be dealing with what am I forgetting? Weights. They're going to be picking an offense, all those kind of things. You know, give us your input. Tell us what we're doing well and what we're not doing well, and how we can improve and where we can what road we need to walk down. So here's Brian. All right, welcome to Coach Unplugged. Usually I have to have people pronounce their names, but that's a pretty easy one. And my mom's maiden name is McCormick, so no one cracked my
Oh wow.
yeah, so it's a small world, so that one was easy. So what I'm going to do, Brian, is I'm going to turn it over to you. And usually what we do is very conversational at the beginning. I would, you kind of sent me a resume, but what I would like to do is hear about your basketball journey, kind of how it started. You've had a lot of different twists and turns that most people have had. So if you could go and just kind of explain that, that'd be great.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think I kind of always knew I wanted to be a coach. My dad was my coach when I was elementary school. He coached most of my sports, but especially basketball and baseball. And then I remember back like in second grade or third grade, I read They Call Me Coach by John Wooden for a book report, because my dad was a big UCLA fan, before I was born. And so somehow I'm pretty sure he told me to read that book or something, or I went to the library and looked for basketball books and somehow found that one. And I kind of wanted to be a coach from that point. And so, like most coaches, I played, and I only played in high school. And then I ended up, after high school, I spent a year as an exchange student in Europe and in Sweden. And it just happened, there was a team in my town, and so I ended up playing on that team, the second division team, and the under 19 team in my town. And ultimately, I also ended up coaching. And so I started coaching an under 15 boys team. And this was, in 1996, it was the middle of the war in the Balkans. And I had a number of recent refugees on my team from both sides of the conflict. And then I also had a few that were semi-recent refugees from, the Iraq War, the first Iraq War in the early 90s. So, one, my Swedish was terrible. Two, their English was, for most of them, was their third or even fourth language, and Swedish was even their, second or third language. So it's like either there were one or two, kind of for each, ethnic group almost. There were one or two players who spoke a little bit better English, but most of my coaching, it was done through them, and they would then translate, into their language, and then a lot was obviously with demonstrations. And so I did that and enjoyed it.
That makes you a better teacher. I'm telling you, one of my first classes teaching, I'm a math teacher. One of my first classes teaching, I had most of my students didn't speak English at all, like zero. Like they were Hmong, and they didn't speak English. So it was one of those, like, how do you get what you need across to them? It makes you a better teacher because it makes you think outside the box a little bit.
Definitely. And I've written about another experience, actually, similarly to that. Years later, I was working at a camp, and then probably 2 years after the camp, I had a JV girls team, and in both situations, I had girls who were deaf on my team. And having a girl on your team who can't hear changes how you instruct.
Yeah, it does. It's crazy because I played college basketball, and we played Gallaudet, which is the deaf school in DC. For sure. And it was, and we went there to play. It was as a player, it was a unique thing because it was so quiet. Pregame was quiet. It was an interesting, and then how the coach was able to communicate to get things. I mean, we ended up losing the game too. I remember that vividly. But go ahead. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. But
no worries. But it makes you realize how often, as a coach, you're kind of yelling and just yelling, not without making sure that the player's really actually paying attention to you.
Right.
Because you can assume, a lot of times I think, we yell and we assume that they're hearing us. And if they don't change or whatever, they're just ignoring what we have to say. But coaching in this, situation and environment, I had to make sure, with both players, they could read lips. So I had to make sure that they were actually facing me and I had eye contact before I even bothered, to instruct. And so there'd be times, she'd be running down the court, and I'd be ready to, try to give her feedback or yell something at her or get her to change her position or get her to notice that there was, somebody behind her that she didn't see or, whatever it was.
Right.
I was like, oh, well, she's not going to hear me. There's no sense. And I need to find better ways to communicate, especially with her, but also with all players. So anyway, back to the story. So I did that in Europe. Then I went to college. I ended up coaching through most of my 4 years of college. I actually started with Special Olympics and then moved to, CYO, AAU, high school. And then ultimately when I graduated, I started as a college assistant coach. And I was kind of, and this is why the exchange student experience becomes relevant, is I looked at it and I realized, if I was going to be a college assistant coach or a college coach, I was going to spend years and years and probably decades as an assistant coach before I ever got to be a head coach. And I really wanted to be a head coach. And I was applying for high school head coaching jobs, but they kept telling me I was too young. And so I emailed my old coach in Sweden. And I was like, man, how do I get a job in Europe? And he's like, well, I don't know, email all the clubs and see if anybody, has the job open. Right. And so I emailed all the clubs in Sweden, and I one of them emailed back, and we exchanged 40 or 50 emails over the course of probably 2 months, and eventually they offered me the job, and so I moved back to Sweden to a different town, and coached women's, I guess their version of professional league, the highest women's league in Sweden. And, and so I had that opportunity. But basically I was able to get that job more or less because I asked for it.
Right.
And they never asked how old I was. And so when I stepped off the plane, I think were a little stunned, that they had managed to hire somebody so young to be their head coach, because I had at least half my team was older than me.
Right.
And I was 25 at the time, and my oldest player on the team was 41. My youngest player was 17. So at a huge age.
Right.
And it was it was a pretty unique experience. It was fun. I was actually on an island in the middle of the Baltic Sea, Gotland, and coached the Visby ladies and did okay. And then I came back and I thought, I actually coached in the All-Star game there. And so I met some young players who were trying to come to the States to go to college. And so I figured if I left there and came back, with these contacts and having been a head coach and stuff, I'd be able to get, a better college assistant position, and so I talked to some D1 coaches and nothing ever worked out. And so that's when I started doing a lot of skill training, with players in between jobs. And that's also, the skill training led me to watch a couple other skill trainers, one of whom I knew when I was a player, when I was young, and to see some of the things that they were doing in terms of plyometrics and so forth, jump training.
Right.
And I intuitively knew what they were doing was wrong, or at least what they were saying they were doing wasn't what they were actually doing, but I didn't know why. And that's one of the reasons that I pursued a master's degree, and then also got my CSCS around that time. And then from then I've, kind of alternated between coaching high school. I've been overseas, twice more since then. I've done clinics all over the world, and then spent some time as strength and conditioning coach and a couple of different things. And I've been a personal trainer. I've taught spinning classes. Now I'm a college soccer referee as well. And yesterday was officially hired to be a junior college women's basketball head coach.
Okay.
So,
congratulations. Congratulations.
Well, thanks.
So and then you did your PhD. What did you do your PhD in?
It's in exercise and sports science.
And what was your thesis on?
I actually wrote I had an option of doing what they call a 3-paper dissertation. So my 3 papers, one was on kind of specific basketball defense. So I looked at the difference between a hip turn and a drop step on a simple change of direction task. One was on a 6-week plyometrics training program, so looking at the difference between doing all frontal plane plyometrics versus all sagittal plane plyometrics. And then the third one was kind of a week correlational study, kind of looking at the same idea as how plane of movement affects the correlation between power, reactive strength, and strength.
Okay, so can a kid improve his vertical by doing plyometrics, or is that not the way to go?
Yes,
they can. And is it a fast twitch, a slow twitch kind of thing, or is it a muscle thing or a strength thing, or?
It's all of the above.
Okay.
And in terms of how you're using the plyometrics, it depends on exactly, what type of exercise you're doing. And so then you get in somewhat into semantics, because what a lot of the exercises that we think of as being plyometrics wouldn't fit with the strict definition of plyometrics from its original source.
Okay.
So if you're, if I'm standing on the ground and I'm jumping onto a box,
right,
and then I'm going to step off and I'm going to jump on the box again.
Right.
Technically, that's jump training. That's not plyometrics, because you're not using the kind of the shock training or a real benefit from the stretch shortening cycle. There's, if you're using counter movement, you are to an extent, but not to the extent, that one would say it's plyometrics. So, and that was one of the things I looked at in my dissertation is the reactive strength index. And so that's basically, if you were doing, let's say you were standing on one box and you were going to step off, land on the ground, and then jump onto a second box.
Right.
So a depth jump. And so the reactive strength index then would look at your height of your jump divided by your ground contact time.
Okay.
And so within the literature regarding plyometrics and the stretch shortening cycle, fast stretch shortening cycle would be less than 250 seconds ground contact time, 250 milliseconds ground contact time. And some people would even say more 150 to 200 milliseconds, that 250 is even too slow. But typically 250 is used as the cutoff. And so over that would be, the slow stretch shortening cycle. So, so there's different ways to improve, and depending on the training that you're doing, you can attack different parts of the force velocity curve and, see benefits, whether, you're working on your max force or you're working, on the end on your, max speed or somewhere in between.
Right.
And to a certain extent, especially with a younger athlete, improving any of that is going to improve a vertical jump.
Right. And it's almost like some of them are doing it too young, in my opinion, because their bodies aren't even strong enough or mature enough to be able to. Is there an age in which this should start?
Yeah, so that's another one of the kind of debates, and so to a certain extent I agree, and to a certain extent I disagree. So I agree because to get a true benefit from true plyometric training, you do have to have strength. And I know when I was growing up, it was always, you have to be able to squat 2 times your body weight to do plyometrics. And I wouldn't agree with that. I think there's a firm number where you have to be able to, squat a certain amount, and stuff. So, but you do have to be strong. And so when I did my study and I was trying to get, people with a ground contact time under 250 milliseconds, it was actually difficult to find research subjects who could, off a 30 centimeter box, could land on the ground and jump with any height with a ground contact time less than 250 milliseconds. They would just land and
pause.
It would just be too slow.
Right.
For what I was for, and especially with I was using a general college population for that study. But for some of the females that I had in the study, I actually had a few athletes mixed in, not basketball players, but I actually had a girl who was a competitive, not figure skater, but speed skater, and had been retired for 1 year, was still in phenomenal shape. She was racing bikes at that time. But, so I had some decent athletes, but they had a really hard time getting off the ground. And part of that was lack of strength.
Right.
So if you're not strong enough, then you're going to be very compliant on your landing, and you're not going to have the stiffness that's required to kind of bounce off the ground, to reduce your ground contact time. That being said, most activities that children do have an element of plyometrics to them. So when children go out and they play hopscotch or sprinting, these are, plyometric activities. And typically, playing the hopscotch is a low intensity plyometric.
Right.
Versus doing, a depth jump off a 30 centimeter or 40 centimeter box, which would be a much higher intensity. So, again, what you're doing, how you're going to program with a child, what they're going to benefit from is going to ultimately depend on who that child is, what their training history is, what their, strength level is, but I wouldn't say you can't do plyometrics with, children of any age, because every child's running around and jumping and landing.
And sometimes I think they're doing less of that now. That the multi-sport athlete, I think they were doing it more 25 years ago than they are now. It seems like 10-year-olds are picking one sport already.
That's definitely true. And then there's and because of that, there's probably children today have a kind of a smaller base of both strength and just general movement vocabulary. And that's one reason why we probably see more injuries.
Right. Oh, I definitely
narrowed.
I had Division I guys that could hardly skip. They could hardly get the other hand going opposite. I mean, it's crazy because they don't do that stuff when they're little.
Yeah, I see that all the time.
Yeah.
So the narrowing of all these skills into just, a single sport-specific execution of that skill, limits how, the child learns. And ultimately, when there is some variation in the movement or some greater intensity or greater volume, there's probably a greater chance that they break down, and the load becomes greater than what they can tolerate. And that's essentially an injury.
Right.
Whether it becomes an overuse injury, where the volume of the load is greater than they can tolerate, or whether it's an acute injury, where, maybe a girl lands from a layup and tears her ACL or something like that.
Right. Okay. So I've got some basketball questions for you now.
Okay, great.
All right, so all right, if you could only do 3 things at practice, what would they be and why? Hey, Coach, hope you're enjoying the podcast. Make sure you subscribe and like. I would ask pretty please go and leave a review. We really do appreciate those. I guess I could go pretty please go join tryouts.com, become a better basketball coach. Resources, like I've said in previous ones, you go spend half $500 on a clinic, or you go buy a video or do something like that. You could go spend just $29.99 and have thousands of videos and thousands of things on there to make you a better basketball coach. So go over and check it out. 2 other things. If you want to check us, our YouTube channel, Teach Hoops, just type that in 2 separate words. And our Amazon link down below. Click on that. Anytime you purchase, if you bookmark it, you won't even notice it's there, but we get a small little commission, and it does help us pay for the hosting fees and stuff. All right, let's head back to the podcast.
I'd almost just say 3-on-3, and depends on how strict the 3 want to be. If every time I switch the rules for a 3-on-3 game, then I'd probably pick 3 different.
If you're looking to become a Patreon of the Arts, if you're looking to support us and you're not going to join teachhoops.com, which is what I would love you to do, you could go over and support. If you have a podcast idea, if you want to be on the podcast, if you If you have any sort of input anywhere, any sort of donation, go to www.patreon.com/Coach Unplugged and make a donation, and we would surely appreciate that. So let's get back to Brian.
Different 3-on-3 games, and that would be it.
Okay.
If I can change the rules every time, and that still only counts as one thing because it's just 3-on-3 play,
Right.
then I'd probably do. I'd probably play 3-on-3 most of the time. I'd do it, find a favorite shooting drill and then a transition defense drill.
Okay. I think 3-on-3 is the purest part of the basketball game. I mean, I think kids should play 3-on-3 until they're in middle school. They should play it their whole career, but I know in our program we don't play full court open gym. We play 3-on-3 because that you can't hide. It makes you work on your game. I just think it's a really pure part. I 100% agree with that.
Yeah.
If you could go back to yourself as a younger coach, what would you tell yourself?
Probably to be more patient. Not necessarily with players, but in terms of managing a career. I tend to be in a hurry, and I want things to happen now. And then the second part of that is understanding that, especially with regards to the college basketball business or even the professional basketball business, the thing that matters most is who you know. It doesn't really matter how good you are or what you know, or it all comes down to relationships and knowing somebody that's in a position to hire you for a job. Something that I didn't learn until it was, to a certain extent, too late.
Right. It's crazy. I have a former Division I assistant on my staff, and he says the most important weekend of the year is the Final Four because that's when you make all your connections. He says that's number one. Number two is when you're out recruiting, because it's all about, John gets a job. He knows him. He knows her, blah, blah, blah. That's how you get a job. And so the advice I always give coaches is you got to go out and network. And you got to go work camps in the summer because that's when coaches kind of get to know you and some of those young coaches working camps eventually becomes head coaches who will eventually look to fill their staff out, so on and so forth. But yeah, it's not the way it should be, but it's the way the world works in a lot of ways.
It's the same as any business. So, but yeah, I didn't realize that young enough, and so yeah. If I was talking to myself back, when I was graduating for college or whatever, that's probably focus more on the relationships and don't worry so much about becoming a better coach.
Yeah, it's so backwards. So in a paragraph or two, describe your coaching philosophy.
I guess my biggest thing is I really try to empower players, and that's both on and off the court. So I want the players to take ownership of the team and, from the whole process. So whether that's, like I met for the first time with my new team yesterday and we only have 5 returners. So, didn't meet with very many people, but that's one of the things I told them was, cause they're almost in finals. So I didn't want to come in and from day one be like, all right, we're going to work out, 5 days a week. And I have no idea what their school schedule is or what their commitments are or anything right now. So it's like, you guys need to tell me, how much do you guys want to work out? How good do you want to be? And once we get everybody in the fall, those are going to be, to a certain extent, my questions. And, I still have a veto vote, but, I want them to be really invested in what we're doing and to take ownership and to really feel empowered that it's our program and it's not my program. And then I carry that as much as possible onto the court as well. So, I tend not to stand and scream a lot. I don't call plays. I let the players call plays, whether it's out of bounds or, half court play or transition offense, whatever we're going to run. I try to let them call the play. Occasionally I'll see something and so I'll call something based on what I've seen from a previous play. But generally I'm letting the players, I remember my first year when I was in Sweden, one of when I was coaching in Sweden. The first tight game we had, I called timeout and I brought them over. I was like, all right, what do you guys want to run?
Right.
And they're like, they looked at me because nobody really ever asked them that, and I was like, look, we have 5 plays. I want, you guys have been out there. What do you guys have the most confidence in right now that's going to get us the shot that we need, to get a basket right here? And they're like, oh, okay. And run Arizona. I'm like, all right, let's do it. Go.
Right.
So that's kind of, how I coach is I really try to get feedback from the players and see my role as somebody who's really trying to assist them or work for the players as opposed to more of a domineering role where they're working for me.
Right. And I don't know, this is maybe with me getting older too, but I ask that question a lot. I'll ask it in timeouts. I'll ask it in 30 seconds. And of course, it goes back to what you said. I have the veto vote, but I want their input because they're seeing things differently than I am. I'm worried about substitutions. I'm worried about who's tired. I'm worried about whether I'm watching 85 different things. They're not. And this is the first year I actually had my point. We usually meet as a coaching staff before I go back to the huddle. This year I actually had my point guard come in the coaching huddle with me and give his input before we went back to the whole team. And that helps so much because he obviously has the ball in his hands. He's seeing things differently. But yeah, I think, I would say that's probably pretty similar to my, it's our program. What are we going to do? Obviously, there's times where we got to make decisions. But if you could talk to one coach for an hour, who would it be and why?
Oh, wow. That's a tough one. One coach. Living, I assume?
No, it doesn't have to be. It can be any sport, too.
Yeah, I'd probably go with Wooden. I had a chance to meet him very briefly because I went to UCLA for undergrad. And so at that time, he used to talk to psychology classes every year.
Okay.
So my friend brought me to her psychology class the day that he was, going to speak. So I met him for like 2 minutes.
Right.
So I'd probably say Wooden. I'd also think about somebody like I don't know. It'd be interesting.
I pick Stevens. I think Brad Stevens' mind thinks unlike other people's.
I've actually been in his office and talked to him a little bit. I'd be curious to meet with somebody like Pep Guardiola or Jose Mourinho. I'm not necessarily huge fans of theirs, but I do think it would be interesting, to speak with them. And the other person I was thinking of, and honestly don't know his name, but the All Blacks coach, because I read Legacy about the All Blacks. James Kerr, I think, wrote it, and it's a phenomenal book. So somebody like that, I'd probably think about a couple, different people. I probably would be most interested in speaking to somebody almost on kind of the organizational aspect of running a really, constantly high performing organization and especially one that has turnover in players and personnel. So that'd probably be who I would, at this point right now, would want to talk to.
Okay. Do you have any superstitions?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. A lot of coaches have superstitions. If you could only do one offense and one defense for an entire game, what would you do?
Well, I don't think that's all I do anyway. I'd probably, I tend to start either with pistol or kind of like was a Spurs motion week.
Okay.
Those tend to be basic offenses, so I'd probably go with one of those two, depending on it.
Yeah.
And I just, with ideal personnel, I'd play man defense and I'd switch everything.
Yep. But I think the key to that answer is that you got to have the right personnel to do that. I love man too, but sometimes you just
definitely.
We had to play a matchup this
definitely.
year. We just couldn't. We couldn't match up. Yeah. What do you think the biggest change in basketball has been in the last 15 or 20 years?
Probably the use of the 3-point line. I would say both the use of the 3-point line and not being able to hand check. And to a certain extent, I think they go together.
And why do you think they go together?
Because by spacing out the court, because everybody acknowledges the importance of the 3-point line, you give so much more room to penetration. And then consequently, because you can't really guard somebody, because you can't hand check at all, you have to, basically pick your poison, whether you're going to help or whether you're going to stick on shooters. And so I think, I think the 3-point line, or the emphasis on the 3-point line, might be slightly different if you could hand check more, because you'd be able to keep players out of the paint a little bit better.
Yeah.
And so you wouldn't have to help off shooters as much. And on the same side, if we were still, in the 1980s where teams were shooting 10 3-pointers a game, well, it wouldn't matter as much if you could hand check or not, because you could have, 4 defensive players basically, standing right around the key and forcing the ball out to, 17-foot jump shots.
Right.
So I do think they go together a little bit. And so,
I think that's why kids don't shoot. I think that's why kids don't shoot mid-range jumpers anymore. The cost benefit's not there for them, and they don't work on it. So maybe this is related, but if you could change one thing about basketball, what would it be?
The change I would make would be I would have the youngest players starting with 3-on-3 basketball and using appropriate size baskets and appropriate size hoops. I just think too many leagues, too many age groups, too many organizations start too early with players and have them either playing 5-on-5 and or have them on 10-foot hoops, where maybe they're in, second grade, and have them using, usually a women's ball, but that's still too big for, especially first or second grader. They should be using, a 27.5, not a 28.5.
Right.
Or even smaller basketball. And so to me, that'd be the change that I would make is, all children, assuming they're going to start the game somewhere between, 5 and 8 years old, but all children start on lowered hoop with a small basketball, and playing 3-on-3 or even 2-on-2. And like you said, not move to 5-on-5 until, probably 5th or 6th grade.
Right. And I didn't even let my son shoot threes until he was in 7th grade because he wasn't strong enough. I wasn't gonna. I'm gonna still have to shot down a couple of times, but I was not gonna. I was not gonna break it down 6 times. So, because he wasn't strong enough. And all his friends are popping threes, and it's like, great, yeah, they're shooting from the hip because they can't. It'd be like me shooting on a 15-foot hoop,
Right.
Yeah. All right, so some rapid fire questions. These are real quick. What's your favorite basketball?
My favorite basketball?
Yeah.
Wilson Solution.
Okay. Haven't had that one. One word to describe your ideal player.
Shooter.
Lost art. One sporting event. You can go to one sporting event anywhere in the world. What would it be?
Ooh. Man, I'd probably go to a World Cup final.
Oh, that would be wild. Especially yes. Where am I? Oh, what's your favorite pregame meal?
steak.
That's been said a couple of times. One thing you do to relax.
Probably take a nap, read a book.
Okay. Best player you have seen in person.
Well, I was at LeBron James' first game in the NBA, so I'd probably say that.
That'd probably be pretty good. Best player of all time.
I mean, it's hard not to say MJ, but I kind of do say LeBron James.
Yeah, well, I've had a lot of MJs, but I think LeBron's going to pass him. I mean, if he hasn't already. One thing that helped you become a better coach.
One thing, that's hard. I mean, I really do think, coaching players who, didn't speak English, coaching players who are deaf, and I think, coaching in Europe and just seeing the different kind of, different style of play and everything. I think those are why I tend to coach differently, I think.
Okay. Best game you have seen in person.
That's easy. UCLA's 1990. What year did we win the national championship? 94 national championship.
Yeah.
Was that
Oh, you were there at the national championship game?
95. It was my senior
95.
year of high school. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
95 in Seattle. Yeah.
Wow.
So that was the best game.
Yeah. You can't top that one. Well, one word to describe your coaching style.
One word. Player friendly, if that's hyphenated.
Okay, we'll give that to you. One book you'd recommend.
What?
One book that you would recommend. We're not going to recommend you. We're going to talk about yours in a second, but one book you would recommend.
I usually recommend Mindset by Carol Dweck to parents and coaches, and then I also really recommend The Art of Learning by Josh Waitzkin.
Mindset's a great book. It's hard not to have a fixed mindset. It really is.
Yeah.
All right. So we're going to end here with let's talk about. You have some books. We'll put all this stuff in the show notes that we're just going to talk about now. I'll put those two books in the show notes too, so people that are listening to this can find this stuff. But tell us about your books, some stuff you have, how people can get a hold of you, that kind of stuff.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, most of my books are on Amazon now, so they're fairly easy to find.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, I've written about 20 books now, going back, over the last decade now, I guess. I wrote 20 books, and on various things, kind of, everything from kind of the first one was Crossover, the new model of youth basketball development, which is kind of a longer book that was a little bit based on the long-term athlete development model that's been popularized in Canada and elsewhere, Islam Bali's model.
Right.
And so I just kind of tried to apply it to basketball, and especially basketball in the U.S. Because things in the U.S. are based on, the high school and the school system and not on age groups. So some of the ways that plans in other countries are outlined, are based on, under 19s kind of being the last, age group, whereas, that doesn't necessarily work with, a high school timeline.
Right.
Although as more players stay back or redshirt in high school, it's starting to become the same. But, so anyway, so I divided into 4 kind of basic or general stages, phases, and 3 different skill groups. And then I think in the last edition I wrote, I added a 4th. So it's technical, athletic, tactical, and psychological skills. And there's lots of drills and different things, and I kind of go through, the different stages with the different skills. So it ends up being a fairly long and fairly involved book. And then, the more recent books that I wrote are more based on a lot of motor learning concepts and practice design, 21st century basketball practice, obviously. It's basically about how to run a practice, how to design drills, what's important, so on and so forth, how to give feedback, how not to give feedback, when to give feedback, things like that. And then I kind of have lots of things in between, book on perimeter skills, shooting, the fake fundamentals books, stuff like that. So
Okay.
Most topics have been touched in some regard in at least one of the books.
Great. So I'll make sure I put those in the show notes, and I really appreciate you taking the time tonight to talk to us.
All right, great. Yeah, thank you very much.
Thanks, Brian.
Hey, everybody. I hope you really enjoyed today's podcast. I know how much I have. I want you to go over and take 2 minutes and check over teachhoops.com. It's an essential resource for anybody that wants to be a better coach. It's like I was saying at the beginning of this podcast. It's what you need to win championships, to understand this great game. It is something I would want both as a consumer and as a coach. Go check that out. You get a 14-day free trial. You can, I love when I can do that because I'm always get risky about putting my credit card in. But if you don't like it, we'll refund it right away and you're good to go. Also, if you're liking these podcasts, I ask you to go over and subscribe and like. We really do appreciate those reviews. Those 5 stars really help us no matter what you're listening to and on what. Doesn't matter if you're on Stitcher, if you're on iTunes, whatever you're on, wherever you're listening to this podcast, we would really appreciate a review. And until next week, remember, keep your head up, keep your elbows out, and always look down the court. Have a great week.
Sleep Number's new collections are designed to adapt to the changing nature of your life and your sleep needs. Whether it's the personalized comfort of the Comfort Mode mattress, the targeted pressure relief of the Comfort Next mattress, or the Climate Collection that actively cools or warms to help you fall asleep and stay asleep.
And now, all beds are on sale during our biggest sale of the year. Save 25% on the new Comfort Next Luxe for a limited time, only at a Sleep Number store or sleepnumber.com.
There she goes, our baby.
Are we ready for this?
You added her to your AAA auto policy. With 24/7 claim support, she's covered.
Our AAA agent, you're here too?
We're always here for you. Visit AAA.com/insurance to get a quote today.